I'm Mr. Mushroom, and welcome, my diabolical beauties, to Rabbit Hole Nightmare.
I woke up knowing something was wrong. It wasn't a sound or a nightmare, it was a feeling. My chest felt occupied, like a presence had arrived before my consciousness did. The room was dim, lit only by the faint glow of a streetlight leaking through the blinds, slicing the walls into pale bars. Everything looked exactly as it should, and that was the problem. Nothing warned me. I tried to roll onto my side. Nothing happened. My body was heavy in a way I'd never felt before, not tired or sore. Heavy like gravity had been turned up just for me. I tried to inhale and realized my lungs were already full of useless air that refused to do anything helpful. Each breath felt shallow, borrowed, insufficient. Then the pressure increased. It wasn't sudden. It was deliberate. A slow, patient descent, like something carefully lowering its weight onto my chest, testing how much I could handle. My ribs protested first. Then my throat tightened, not choking me, but threatening to. I tried to scream, my mouth opened, my jaw moved. My tongue pressed against my teeth, no sound came out. Panic bloomed hot and fast. My heart hammered so violently I could feel it in my neck, but my body stayed perfectly still. I strained so hard my vision speckled with light. Nothing responded, not my hands, not my legs, not even my neck. And then I felt it, not touching me yet, just there. The sense of being observed is different from being watched. Being watched implies eyes. This felt broader than that, like an awareness without direction. Like something had entered the room and immediately knew exactly where I was, even in the dark. My eyes slid to the corner of the room. The darkness there was thicker, wrong. It didn't reflect light the way the rest of the shadows did. It bent inward like a hole punched into the air. As I stared, it shifted, not moving forward, but rearranging itself, folding and unfolding like a thought changing its mind. The pressure on my chest deepened. My lungs began to burn. I tried to count my breaths, but lost count immediately. My breathing wasn't my own anymore. It felt supervised, regulated, allowed in short, humiliating doses. The shape in the corner separated itself from the darkness. It wasn't tall, it wasn't short. It didn't make sense spatially, like my brain couldn't agree on its size. It slid toward me without lifting, without stepping, without a sound. As it approached, the air grew colder, heavier, like humidity before a storm. It stopped beside the bed. I wanted to shut my eyes. I was terrified that if I saw its face, something irreversible would happen. But my eyelids refused to move, frozen open, forced to witness. The thing leaned over me. Its outline blurred and sharpened at the same time. Parts of it seemed unfinished. Other parts were too detailed creases, angles, impressions where features should have been. I couldn't tell if it had eyes, but I knew with sick certainty that it could see me. The pressure on my chest became unbearable. I tried to breathe again and failed. My throat fluttered uselessly. My body sent frantic signals that went nowhere. My fingers twitched once, just enough to give me a flash of hope. The thing reacted instantly. The air vibrated. A low buzzing filled my body, starting in my spine and spreading outward, like electricity crawling through my nerves. My skin prickled violently. My teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached. The sensation wasn't pain, it was wrongness, like my body was being tuned to a frequency it wasn't meant to receive. Then came the crawling, not on my skin, under it. Tiny movements, hundreds of them, skittering beneath the surface of my legs, my stomach, my arms. I felt invaded from the inside. My breath broke into panic gasps, each one shallower than the last. The thing lowered itself further until its weight fully settled onto my chest. My ribs compressed. My lungs collapsed inward. I could feel my heartbeat struggling, slamming against the pressure like an animal trapped in a cage. It leaned closer. And for the first time, I understood something with absolute clarity. This thing wasn't attacking me, it was studying me, measuring my fear, testing my limits, learning exactly how much pressure it took to make me break. Just as my vision began to tunnel, just as the room started to darken at the edges, the weight lifted. Suddenly, violently, I sucked in air like I'd been underwater. My body jolted upright, muscles screaming as control returned all at once. The buzzing vanished, the crawling stopped. The corner of the room was empty. I sat there gasping, soaked in sweat, my heart racing. Everything was normal again, except my chest still felt bruised. And deep down, beneath the relief, beneath the rational explanations already forming in my mind, one thought settled in quietly. It knew where I was, and it wasn't finished. The second time was worse because I recognized it. I woke up to the paralysis instantly. There was no confusion, no denial. The moment I realized I couldn't move, dread flooded me so fast it felt rehearsed. My room was darker than usual. No streetlight glow, no comforting reference points, just an inky blackness that seemed to swallow the familiar shapes of my furniture. The pressure arrived seconds later, firm, confident, familiar. It settled onto my chest with the same deliberate weight as before, an invisible force pinning me to the mattress. I didn't bother trying to scream. I already knew it was pointless. My vocal cords were locked, my lips sealed. Instead, I focused on breathing, shallow and controlled, terrified of provoking it. Each tiny inhale felt like a rebellion, each exhale a surrender. That's when the vibrations started. They weren't subtle this time, not a gentle tremor like a distant train. My entire body buzzed as if it were plugged into an electrical outlet. The sensation crawled through my bones, rattling my teeth, making my vision shimmer at the edges. I felt detached from my own body, like my consciousness was hovering just above my skull, a terrified spectator watching the panic unfold below. My physical self was just a vessel, a conduit for this strange, invasive energy. And then I heard something, not a voice, not a sound from the room. It was a hum, low, rhythmic, patterned. It wasn't coming from the thing on my chest. It was inside my head, vibrating along with my nerves, syncing itself to my heartbeat. As my heart hammered against my ribs, the hum matched its frantic pace, then seemed to coax it into a slower, more deliberate rhythm. I realized with growing horror that the vibrations weren't a side effect of the fear. They were a signal. The shadow emerged again, coalescing from the darkness above me, but this time it wasn't alone. Vague shapes gathered at the edges of the room, subtle and half-formed, like thoughts not fully remembered or after-images burned into my retina. They didn't approach. They just watched, waiting, a silent, expectant audience for a performance I didn't know I was giving. Their presence amplified the isolation, making me feel like a specimen under a microscope. The thing on my chest leaned down, and I felt its weight shift upward, concentrating directly over my heart. The pressure was no longer a crushing weight, but a focus point of immense force, as if a single heavy finger was pressing into my sternum. The humming intensified, the frequency rising until it felt like it would shatter my skull. Images flooded my mind, not dreams, not memories, but impressions. They were raw, alien, and yet disturbingly familiar. I saw countless people, an endless sea of them, lying exactly as I was, in beds, on couches, on cold, hard floors. Their eyes were wide open, staring at unseen ceilings, their bodies frozen in the same rigid paralysis. And on every single one of them, I could feel the same crushing, invisible weight. We were connected. The realization hit me harder than the fear, a jolt of understanding that momentarily eclipsed the terror. This wasn't personal. This wasn't some random demon or night terror haunting just me. This was communal, a network, a broadcast. The thing wasn't feeding on me, not in the way I'd first thought. It was tuning me. Like an old radio, it was adjusting the frequency of my being, aligning my consciousness with something vast and incomprehensible. The vibration surged one last time, a powerful wave that washed through every cell. For a moment, just a single terrifying moment, I felt something snap into place inside my head. The fear dulled, the panic flattened, smoothed out into a placid lake. In its place came a horrifying calm, an acceptance, understanding. It wasn't my understanding. It felt borrowed, implanted. The thing lifted its weight slightly, just enough to let me take a deeper breath, just enough to keep me alive. It wasn't trying to kill me. It needed me conscious. It needed me aware. Then, as suddenly as it began, the paralysis released. I shot up right in bed, gasping for air, clutching my chest where the pressure had been. My heart was a frantic drum against my palm. The room was empty. The shadows at the periphery were gone. The oppressive darkness had retreated, and the faint, familiar glow of the streetlight was once again filtering through my window. But the hum didn't stop. It lingered faintly in my ears, like tinnitus, like a memory that refused to fade. Even awake, even moving around and turning on every light in the house, I could still feel the echo of it in my bones. It was a ghost note, a constant, low-frequency reminder of what had just happened. That night, I didn't dare go back to sleep. I sat with my back against the headboard, watching the door, listening. But when exhaustion finally claimed me in the early hours of the morning, I dreamed. I dreamed of other rooms, other ceilings, other people waking up, frozen, breathing shallowly as shadows leaned over them. And in my dream, I heard us. I heard all of us. Every single one of us was humming in perfect, horrifying sync. We were an unwilling choir, our bodies turned into instruments, playing a song for an audience I couldn't see. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me more than any darkness, that the concert was far from over. The signal had been sent. I had been tuned. And now I was part of the broadcast. By the third time, I stopped fighting. I knew the pattern by now, the telltale warning signs. The air in the room would grow heavy, almost thick, like wading through unseen water. There was a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a quiet hum just beneath the surface of hearing. That came right before sleep fully took me. It was a change I'd learned to dread. I could feel it waiting, patient, like a predator that didn't need to rush its hunt. It knew I had nowhere to go. So when I woke up, paralyzed, I didn't panic. Not this time. My eyes snapped open, but the rest of my body remained a leaden weight, pinned to the mattress. The pressure settled onto my chest immediately, heavier than ever before, a crushing, suffocating force. But I let it. I didn't struggle against the invisible bindings. Instead, I focused every ounce of my will on my breathing. Slow, shallow, controlled, in out, a tiny rhythm of defiance in the stillness. Soon, the familiar vibrations arrived, buzzing through my bones like an old, unwelcome friend. They started in my spine and spread outwards, a low-frequency thrum that seemed to shake the very atoms of my being. And then the thing appeared at my bedside. It was closer than it had ever been before, so much clearer. Its shape had refined itself. It was as if each visit, each terrifying encounter, allowed it to sharpen its understanding of me, to pull more detail from the fabric of my fear. Before, it was a smudge of darkness, a vague silhouette against the deeper shadows of my room. Now it had form. It had presence. It leaned down, its presence overwhelming, filling my vision, my thoughts, my very lungs, until I felt like I was inhaling its essence with every stolen breath. But I didn't resist. I just lay there, a spectator to my own terror. And that's when everything changed. The moment I surrendered, the moment I stopped feeding it my fear, the dynamic shifted. The crushing pressure on my chest began to ease. The intense vibrations that rattled my teeth softened into a gentler, almost inquisitive hum. The thing tilted its head, a slow, deliberate movement. It was studying me, I realized, with an emotion that felt dangerously, horrifyingly close to curiosity. The predator was no longer just hunting. It was observing, learning. Images began to slide into my mind again, just like the first time. But these weren't flashes of strangers in forgotten places. This time, they were me. I saw myself from an impossible third-person perspective, asleep in my own bed. Then I saw myself awake, going about my day. Then the images fractured. I saw myself breathing, and then not breathing. It was just for a fraction of a second, a moment of absolute stillness. I saw myself in the moments I couldn't possibly remember living, the microseconds between breaths, the infinitesimal pause between heartbeats, the silent, liminal space between consciousness and oblivion. And in that instant, I understood. With a clarity that was more terrifying than any shadow, I understood. It didn't live in my dreams. It wasn't a nightmare given form. It didn't live in my room, a ghost haunting the corners. It lived in the gap, the pause, the infinitesimal stop between an inhale and an exhale. It existed in the silence between thoughts, in the stillness where the body is asleep, but the mind hasn't fully arrived yet. That was its home. That's where it always existed, a native to the spaces we never notice. The thing leaned closer still, and for the first time, I felt something like communication. There were no words, no sounds, just a wave of pure, unadulterated certainty that flooded my consciousness. A message, clear as day. It didn't want me to be afraid anymore. Fear was crude. Fear was temporary. It was a base fuel that burned out too quickly. What it wanted was familiarity. It wanted routine. It wanted me to get used to it. It wanted dependence. It wanted to become a part of my natural rhythm, as essential and unnoticed as the brief pause before my next breath. The pressure lifted completely then. The paralysis released its grip, not with a sudden snap, but slowly, gently, like a favor being granted. First my fingers twitched, then my toes. I took a deep, shuddering breath, the first real one in what felt like an eternity. I could move. I could breathe. The thing receded into the darkness, but it didn't feel like it was leaving. It was just withdrawing, retreating back into its domain, which was, I now knew, inside the very mechanics of my own life. I lay there for a long time, shaking, my heart pounding a frantic drum against my ribs. I was fully awake, fully mobile, and that was the most terrifying part of it all, because now I knew the truth. Sleep paralysis wasn't a malfunction of the brain. It wasn't a misfire between waking and sleeping. It was a doorway, a natural, recurring opening into a place we aren't meant to see. And some nights, even now, as I lie in bed, focusing on breathing carefully, steadily, I swear I can feel it again. Not in my chest, not in the room, but hovering patiently right there in the space between breaths, waiting for me to come back.